The universe had always been a crowded place. Thousands of species spread across millions of worlds, each one believing they were special, each one fighting for power and territory and resources. When humanity first left Earth and joined the Galactic Concord in the year 2147, they were excited. They believed they were entering a community of equals. A place where different species could work together and build something wonderful. They were wrong. Admiral Grace Sullivan stood on the bridge of the starship Endeavour, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the main view screen. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes from too many years of difficult decisions. She had served in the human Navy for 30 years, and she had learned many hard lessons during that time. The hardest lesson was that the galaxy did not respect kindness. It respected power. The transmission had arrived 20 minutes ago. Grace had read it 7 times, and each time she felt something cold and heavy settled deeper into her chest. The Vectari Dominion, one of the most aggressive species in the Concord, had attacked the human colony on Harvest 3. The colony had been a farming world, peaceful and productive, home to 12 million people who had simply wanted to grow food and raise their families under an alien sun. Now they were dead. The images on the screen showed the aftermath. Cities burned to ash, bodies in the streets, schools reduced to rubble. The Vectari had not come to conquer or occupy. They had come to punish. Humanity had voted against a Vectari trade proposal in the Concord Assembly the previous month, and this was the response. A lesson, the Vectari called it. A reminder of their place. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Price approached Grace carefully. He was young, barely 30, with a kind of idealism that Grace had lost long ago. His voice was quiet when he spoke. Admiral, Earth Command is requesting your assessment. Grace did not turn from the screen. Her eyes remained fixed on the burning city, on the small shapes scattered across the ground that had once been people. My assessment is that we have tolerated this for too long, she said. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something dangerous. Contact the Galactic Concord. Request an emergency session. Document everything. Everybody. Every building. Every piece of evidence of what was done here. Nathan nodded and turned to carry out her orders. Grace remained where she was, watching the screen, thinking about history. For 200 years, humanity had tried to be good members of the galactic community. They had followed the rules, even when those rules were unfair. They had accepted treaties that limited their expansion, while other species grew unchecked. They had smiled through insults and absorbed attacks and always sought peaceful solutions. And what had it gotten them? Harvest 3. The Galactic Concord's response arrived within hours. Grace read it with growing disbelief and anger. The statement expressed concern about the incident. It called for an independent investigation. It urged all parties to exercise restraint and pursue diplomatic solutions. It did not condemn the Vectari. It did not promise justice. It did not even acknowledge that 12 million people had been murdered. The reason was simple. The Vectari were powerful. They controlled vast territories and commanded enormous fleets. They were major trading partners with half the species in the Concord. Punishing them would be economically inconvenient. Humanity, by contrast, was young and relatively weak. They had no powerful allies. They had no leverage. Grace forwarded the Concord's response to Admiral Daniel Porter at Earth Command. His reply came within minutes. It contained only 4 words. Await further instructions. Stand ready. She understood what those words meant. Something was changing. Something was finally breaking loose. On Earth, the news spread like fire through dry grass. Every screen on every continent showed the images from Harvest 3. People gathered in the streets, not to riot, but to stand together in shock and grief. Parents held their children close. Veterans wept openly. Something fundamental shifted in the collective heart of humanity that day. The united human. Parliament convened an emergency session in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva. Speaker Jonathan Mills stood at the podium, looking out at the representatives from every nation and territory on Earth and across human space. He was 60 years old, a career politician known for his careful words and measured responses. But today his voice shook with barely controlled rage. 200 years, he said. For 200 years, we have been model citizens of this galaxy. We have compromised. We have accommodated. We have bent over backwards to prove that we are peaceful, that we are reasonable, that we mean no harm to anyone. And what has been our reward? He gestured to the screens behind him, which showed the ruins of Harvest 3. 47 attacks on human colonies and ships in the past 50 years. Thousands of our people killed. And every time we filed complaints, we sought mediation. We trusted the system. And every time, we received nothing but empty words and hollow promises. The assembly was silent. Every eye was fixed on the speaker. The Vectari killed 12 million of our people, Mills continued. 12 million innocent lives ended in fire and blood. And the Galactic Concord's response is to urge restraint, to suggest we negotiate with our murderers, to treat us like children who need to learn our place. He paused. And when he spoke again, his voice was cold and hard. I say no more. I say that humanity has bent far enough. I say that we have shown patience beyond measure, and we have received only contempt in return. Today, I am calling for a vote, not on sanctions, not on diplomatic protests. I am calling for authorization to respond to this attack with every means at our disposal. I am calling for humanity to finally stand up and show the galaxy what we truly are. The vote was unprecedented. Every single representative, from every political faction, voted yes. There was no debate. There was no dissent. For the first time in human history, the entire species spoke with one voice. Enough. In her quarters aboard the Endeavor, Grace received the official notification. She read it carefully, then closed her eyes and let out a long breath. She had served for 30 years, waiting for this moment, hoping it would never come. Knowing that it eventually must, she opened a secure channel to her senior officers and spoke 5 words. Begin Protocol Omega. We're done. Across human space, ships began to move. Factories shifted production. Engineers unsealed projects that had been hidden for decades. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. They still thought humanity was weak. They still believed humans would accept whatever crumbs they were given and be grateful. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In the 3 weeks following the Parliament's vote, the galaxy watched humanity with a mixture of amusement and confusion. Human ships were returning to their ports. Human merchants were closing their shops on alien stations. Human diplomats were quietly excusing themselves from meetings and negotiations across 100 different worlds. It was as if the entire species had decided to go home and sulk. Ambassador Patricia Lane had been humanity's voice in the Galactic Concord for 15 years. She was 62 years old, elegant, and composed. Known for her patience and her ability to find compromise in the most difficult situations, when she submitted her resignation without explanation, the Concord's Secretary General demanded an immediate meeting. Torzak was a Velanthi, a species of tall, blue-skinned beings who prided themselves on their ancient civilization and their sophisticated culture. He sat across from Patricia in his ornate office, his 4 eyes narrowed with irritation. "This is unacceptable," he said. His translator rendered his words in smooth, emotionless tones. "Humanity cannot simply withdraw from galactic affairs. You have obligations, treaties, responsibilities." Patricia smiled. It was a strange smile, one that Torzak could not quite interpret. "We need time," she said. "Time to reflect on our place in this community. Time to consider our future. I am sure you understand." Torzak did not understand. No species had ever voluntarily withdrawn from the Concord. It was unthinkable. The Concord was the center of galactic civilization. To leave it was to become irrelevant, isolated, forgotten. "Is this about the Harvest 3 incident?" he asked. "The investigation is ongoing. Justice will be served in due time." "Of course," Patricia said. Her smile did not change. "In due time?" "Good day, Secretary General." She left his office and did not look back. By the end of the week, She was on a ship heading home to Earth. The other species laughed at humanity's retreat. In the council halls and trade stations and diplomatic gatherings across the galaxy, they made jokes about the soft, emotional humans who could not handle the realities of galactic politics. The Vectari High Command released a public statement expressing satisfaction that humanity had finally learned their place in the natural order. What they did not see was what was happening in the dark spaces between stars. Commander Kyle Bennett stood on the observation deck of the Neptune shipyard, watching the final preparations through the thick glass. He was 45 years old, third-generation military, born and raised on Luna with the cold vacuum of space in his blood. His grandfather had been one of the first humans to serve in an integrated galactic fleet, and he had come home with stories that had shaped Kyle's entire life. "Never let them see what you really are," his grandfather had told him. "Let them think you are weak. Let them underestimate you. And when they push too far, when they finally cross the line, show them everything you have been hiding." Humanity had been hiding a great deal. The ships in the shipyard were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. For 80 years, in secret facilities scattered across the solar system and hidden in the asteroid belts and buried deep in the ice moons of the outer planets, humanity had been building ships, building weapons, building technologies that the Galactic Concord had expressly forbidden them to develop. Dr. Lisa Crawford joined Kyle on the observation deck. She was 58 years old, the white hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that held the intensity of someone who had dedicated her entire life to a single purpose. She had been the lead weapons designer for the secret program for 30 years. Today she would finally see her work deployed. "The spatial fold drive is fully operational," she said. "We tested it twice more this morning. The results exceeded all projections." Kyle nodded slowly. The spatial fold drive was supposed to be impossible. The Concord scientists had declared centuries ago that folding space for instantaneous travel could not be done. Humanity had simply never accepted that declaration. "What about the shield systems?" he asked. Lisa allowed herself a small smile. "A Vectari dreadnought's main cannon could not scratch them." I could not say the same for the other direction. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the ships. There were over 300 vessels in this shipyard alone, and there were 16 other shipyards scattered across human space, each one equally full. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations, hoping it would never come, knowing that it eventually must. Lieutenant Commander Megan Foster approached them with a data tablet. She was young, barely 30, one of the new generation of officers who had grown up knowing about the secret program and waiting for the day they would be called upon. "Admiral Sullivan's fleet is assembled and awaiting orders," she reported. "All 17 battle groups report ready status. The supply lines are secure. Medical ships are standing by." Kyle took the tablet and reviewed the information. The scale of what they were about to do still amazed him, even after years of preparation. Humanity was going to strike back, and they were going to do it in a way that would reshape the galaxy forever. "Has there been any indication that the Concord suspects anything?" he asked. "None," Megan replied. "Our intelligence assets report that most species still believe we are in mourning, and will return to normal diplomatic channels within a month or two. The Vectari have actually reduced their defensive posture around their homeworld. They believe the threat is past." Kyle exchanged a look with Lisa. The Vectari had killed 12 million humans, and then relaxed their defenses because they thought humanity was too weak to respond. The arrogance was almost impressive. "Give the order," Kyle said. "All ships to depart within 6 hours. We rendezvous at coordinates designated point. 0 in 48 hours. Megan saluted and hurried away to transmit the orders. Kyle remained on the observation deck, watching the ships begin their final preparations. In the distance, he could see the massive form of the Retribution, the flagship of the human fleet. It was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that the galaxy had never imagined. Powered by engines that could outrun anything the Vectari possessed. His grandfather had died 10 years ago. Peacefully in his sleep, still believing that humanity would never need to use the weapons they had been building. Kyle wished the old man could see this moment. Not because he wanted war, but because he knew his grandfather would have. Understood, sometimes peace required the willingness to fight, sometimes patience required the courage to, and sometimes the kindest thing a species could do was show the galaxy exactly what happened when they were pushed too far. The first ships began to move, their engines glowing bright against the darkness of space. Humanity was done hiding. Humanity was done waiting. After 200 years of insults and attacks and empty promises, the breaking point had finally arrived. The galaxy had wanted to know what humans looked like when they stopped being patient. They were about to find out. The Vectari. Homeworld was called Vector Prime, and it had never known war. For over 1,000 years, the Vectari had been one of the dominant powers in the galaxy. Their fleets had conquered dozens of worlds. Their armies had crushed countless enemies. But their homeworld, the center of their civilization, the jewel of their empire, had always been untouchable. Protected by 17 orbital defense stations, guarded by 400 warships, surrounded by shield generators powerful enough to stop an asteroid impact, no one attacked Vector Prime. It was suicide. It was impossible. Admiral Grace Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the final countdown on the main view screen. Around her, 300 human warships waited in formation. Hidden in the darkness of deep space, nearly 2 light-years from their target, they had traveled here through conventional means, slow and careful, leaving no trace of their passage. Now they waited for the moment that would change everything. All ships report ready status, Lieutenant Commander Nathan Price announced. Spatial fold drives are charged and synchronized. We are awaiting your order. Admiral Grace looked around the bridge at her crew. These were the best officers in the human navy, handpicked for this mission, trained for years, for exactly this moment. She saw determination in their eyes, and grief, and something else. Something that looked like relief. They had waited so long for this. They had watched their people suffer and die, while the galaxy looked the other way. Now they would finally have their answer. Open a channel to all ships, Grace said. The communications officer nodded. Channel open. Admiral Grace took a breath and spoke. 200 years ago, humanity joined the galactic concord with hope in our hearts. We believed we were entering a community of equals. We believed that justice and fairness would prevail. We were wrong. For 2 centuries, we have been treated as lesser beings. Our colonies have been attacked. Our people have been murdered. Our pleas for justice have been ignored. And through it all, we remained patient. We remained peaceful. We believed that if we just tried hard enough, if we just showed enough good faith, things would change. She paused, her voice hardening. They did not change. 3 weeks ago, the Vectari killed 12 million of our people on Harvest 3. They killed children in their schools. They killed families in their homes. They did this knowing that the Concord would do nothing to stop them. They did this because they believed we were weak. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of. Not because we want war, not because we seek revenge, but because some lessons can only be taught with force. Execute the fold. 300 ships activated their spatial fold drives simultaneously. Space twisted and bent around them. In an instant, they vanished from the darkness of deep space and reappeared directly inside the Vectari defensive perimeter. Less than 10,000 kilometers from the orbital stations, the Vectari had no warning. One moment, their sensors showed empty space. The next, an entire human fleet materialized out of nowhere, in a place where no fleet should be able to go. All batteries open fire, Grace commanded. The battle for Vector Prime lasted for hours. It should not have lasted that long. The human weapons were overwhelming, their shields impenetrable, their ships faster and more maneuverable than anything the Vectari possessed. But Grace had given specific orders. They were not here to slaughter. They were here to teach. The orbital stations fell first. Human ships targeted their weapon systems and power generators with surgical precision, leaving the stations crippled but intact. The Vectari crews would survive. They would be rescued. They would live to tell stories of what they had witnessed. The Vektari fleet scrambled to respond, but they were outmatched in every way. Their weapons splashed harmlessly against human shields. Their maneuvers were predicted and countered before they could be completed. Ship after ship was disabled, their engines destroyed, their weapons silenced, their crews left alive and drifting in the wreckage. Lieutenant Commander Sam Hughes sat at the weapons console, his fingers moving with cold efficiency. He was 32 years old, and his sister had been a teacher on Harvest 3. Her name was Claire, and she had been 28 years old. She had believed with all her heart that the galaxy was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. She had been teaching her students about the beauty of alien art. When the bombs fell, Sam did not think about revenge as he targeted the Vektari ships. He thought about Claire. He thought about her smile and her laugh and the way she had always believed the best about everyone. He thought about the fact that she would never have wanted this, that she would have been horrified by the violence. But Claire was dead, and 12 million others were dead with her. And sometimes the living had to do what the dead could not. The flagship of the Vektari fleet was called the Eternal Dominion. It was a massive dreadnought, 5 kilometers long, the pride of the Vektari Navy. When the tide of battle turned irreversibly against them, the Dominion attempted to flee. Its engines powered up. Its crew set a course for the outer system. "Track that ship," Grace ordered. "Do not let it escape." Sam's hands moved across his console. The targeting solutions calculated in milliseconds. Human ships closed in from multiple angles, cutting off every possible escape route. The Dominion's captain sent a final transmission. "Surrender terms," he demanded. "We will negotiate." Grace looked at the burning wreckage of the Vektari fleet. At the disabled stations at the planet below that had never known the fear of war, she thought about Harvest 3. She thought about the 46 other attacks that had come before. She thought about every time humanity had asked for justice and received nothing but empty words. "Your surrender is accepted." She replied, "Power down your weapons and engines. Your crew will be taken prisoner and treated according to galactic conventions. But understand this, there will be no negotiation. There will be no terms. You will accept what we give you, or you will accept nothing at all." The Dominion powered down. The battle was over. Grace opened a channel that would be broadcast across every frequency in the system, relayed to every corner of the galaxy. "This is Admiral Grace Sullivan of the United Human Navy today. We have destroyed the primary fleet of the Vektari Dominion. We have disabled their orbital defenses and established control of their home system. Their homeworld is intact. Their civilians are unharmed. We are not monsters." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But we are no longer the species that asks for permission. We are no longer the species that accepts empty promises. We are no longer the species that forgives. For 200 years, we tried to be good neighbors. We tried to be peaceful. We tried to believe in justice. You showed us that justice does not exist unless you have the power to enforce it. Very well, now we have the power, and we will use it as we see fit. To the Vektari, we say this: your attack on Harvest 3 has been answered. Pray that you never give us reason to answer again. To the rest of the galaxy, we say this: we are watching. We are waiting. And we are done. The transmission ended. Across 1,000 worlds, species who had laughed at humanity's retreat watched in stunned silence. The soft species had teeth, after all. And they had finally decided to use them. The Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Concord was the largest enclosed space in the known universe. It had been built 3,000 years ago on a neutral world called Terminus, designed to hold representatives from every species that had ever achieved faster-than-light travel. Its curved walls rose nearly 1 kilometer high. Its floor could accommodate 10,000 delegates. Its history was filled with treaties and alliances and the slow, difficult work of maintaining peace among species who had every reason to hate each other. Today, that hall was filled with chaos. Representatives from 47 species shouted at each other across the chamber. Accusations flew like weapons. Alliances that had stood for centuries crumbled in minutes. The attack on Vector Prime had shattered every assumption about the galactic order. Humanity, the soft species, the young species, the species everyone had dismissed as irrelevant, had just defeated one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy in a single afternoon. Secretary General Torzak struggled to maintain order. His 4 eyes scanned the chamber, searching for some way to restore calm. But there was no calm to be found. The galaxy was terrified, and terrified beings did not think clearly. The human delegation is approaching. His aide whispered. Torzak turned toward the main entrance. The doors opened, and the humans walked in. They were 3 days late. No apology was offered. No explanation was given. They simply walked into the chamber as if they owned it, their footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that fell over the assembly. The new human ambassador was a retired general named Matthew Cole. He was 70 years old. With gray hair and a face lined by decades of difficult service, he had fought in 3 border conflicts, commanded defensive fleets during 4 separate attacks on human colonies, buried more friends than he cared to remember. He had been chosen for this role specifically because he would not bend, would not apologize, would not pretend that what humanity had done was anything other than exactly what it was. Beside him walked Dr. Lisa Crawford and Commander Kyle Bennett, representing the military and scientific aspects of humanity's new power. Behind them came a dozen junior diplomats, none of whom spoke. They were there to observe and record. The speaking would be done by Matthew alone. Torzak rose from his seat as the humans approached the central podium. Ambassador Cole, he began, his translator rendering his words in cold, formal tones. The Galactic Concord demands an explanation for the unprovoked attack on Vector Prime. Humanity has violated multiple treaties. You have developed forbidden technologies. You have struck a sovereign power without warning or declaration of war. These are crimes against galactic law. The Concord demands immediate reparations. It's the surrender of all forbidden weapons systems, and the submission of your military to Concord oversight. Matthew listened patiently. When Torzak finished, he waited a moment longer, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then he spoke. For 200 years, we did everything you asked. We followed your rules. We accepted your judgment. We signed your treaties, even when those treaties were unfair. When our colonies were raided, we filed complaints. When our ships were attacked, we sought mediation. When our people were murdered, we asked for justice. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. And what did we receive? Nothing. Delays, excuses. We were told to be patient. We were told that our concerns were not priorities. We watched species that broke every law you claim to uphold face no consequences. While we were sanctioned for the smallest violations, he paused, looking around the assembly at the delegates who had spent centuries treating humanity as an afterthought. Harvest 3 was not the first attack on human civilians. It was the 47th. 12 million dead, and your official response was to suggest we talk to our killers, to urge restraint, to treat us like children who needed to learn our place. The Vectari representative rose to speak, but Matthew silenced him with a look. So let me be clear, Matthew continued. We are not here to ask for your approval. We are not seeking your permission. We are not requesting justice through your system because your system has proven itself incapable of providing justice. We are here to tell you how things will be from now on. He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. It showed the current positions of human fleets across the galaxy. Ships orbited the homeworlds of every major species in the Concord. Thousands of vessels, positioned and ready, waiting for orders. Any species that attacks human civilians will face the full might of our fleet. Any species that threatens our colonies will find their own worlds under our weapons. Any species that believes they can harm us without consequence will discover how wrong they are. The assembly erupted in outrage. The Kelrani representative screamed accusations. The Vorthan delegation threatened war. A dozen other species demanded that something be done. Matthew waited until the noise died down. Then he smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We have been watching you for 200 years. We know your weaknesses. We know your secrets. We know every dirty deal, every hidden crime. Every act of cruelty you thought no one would discover." He gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show detailed information about each species present. Trade secrets, military deployments, corruption scandals, hidden alliances. So before you threaten us, ask yourselves a simple question. Do you really want to find out what else we know? Do you really want to test whether your fleets can match ours? Do you really want to discover what happens when humanity stops being patient? The assembly fell silent. Every eye was fixed on the human ambassador, and in those eyes was something that had never been there before when looking at humanity. "Fear? We did not want this," Matthew said, his voice softening slightly. "We never wanted to be feared. We wanted to be partners. We wanted to build something beautiful together, all of us, every species in this vast universe. But you would not let us. You saw our kindness as weakness. You saw our patience as submission. You pushed and pushed until we had no choice but to push back." He looked directly at Torzak. "The old order is dead. A new one is being born. You can be part of it, or you can be swept away by it. The choice is yours. But know this: we will never again accept the treatment we have received. We will never again bow to those who see our restraint as permission to harm us. We are humanity. We are not monsters, but we are not victims either." He turned and walked toward the exit, his delegation following behind him. "Never again." He said over his shoulder. The words echoed in the great hall long after the humans had gone. Every delegate knew that the galaxy had changed forever. The species they had dismissed and mocked and abused for 2 centuries had finally broken, and in breaking, they had become something the galaxy could no longer ignore. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Vector Prime, and the galaxy had become a different place. The Vectori Dominion had collapsed within months of their defeat. Their military humiliation had sparked civil unrest that quickly grew into full rebellion. Colonies that had been held by force broke away. Client species that had been treated as slaves rose up against their masters. The great empire that had terrorized a quarter of the galaxy for 1,000 years simply fell apart, and no one came to save it. Other aggressive species watched and learned. The Korthon Imperium quietly sued for peace with humanity, agreeing to every term offered without negotiation. The Zelreth Collective disbanded their military expansion program and recalled their fleets to defensive positions. The Vorn Trading Federation, which had been responsible for at least 7 attacks on human merchant vessels over the past century, delivered a formal apology and offered reparations that were double what humanity had. Quested fear was a powerful motivator. The Galactic Concord still existed, but it functioned differently now. Human representatives sat on every major committee. Human ships patrolled the trade routes that had once been dominated by predatory species. Human judges presided over disputes that would have been settled in favor of the powerful in the old days. Justice, actual justice, had become something that could be enforced. Admiral Gray Sullivan retired 2 years after the battle. She had done her duty. She had led humanity through its darkest hour and brought them out the other side stronger than they had ever been. But the weight of what she had done stayed with her. The Vectori she had killed had been soldiers, enemies who had chosen to fight. But they had still been living beings with families and hopes and fears. She did not regret the battle. She only wished it had not been necessary. She bought a small house on the coast of California. Overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the view reminded her of the vastness of space. But it was gentler, warmer, more forgiving. She spent her mornings reading old books and her afternoons tending a garden. Sometimes she walked along the beach and thought about the universe and humanity's place in it. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Price visited her once a year. Always on the anniversary of Harvest 3, he had been promoted to captain now. Commanding his own ship, protecting human colonies on the frontier. He never talked about the battle when he visited. He just sat with her on the porch and watched the sunset and remembered the people they had lost. Lieutenant Nick Sam Hughes left the Navy entirely. He became a teacher, like his sister Claire had been. He taught children about the galaxy, about the different species, about the history of humanity's journey to the stars. He never told his students about Vector Prime. He never mentioned the weapons console or the ships he had helped destroy. He wanted them to grow up believing in the possibility of peace. Even if he had seen how fragile that peace could be, Matthew Cole remained the human. Ambassador to the Galactic Concord until his death at 93 years old, he was a legend by then, the man who had stared down the assembled powers of the galaxy and told them exactly how things would be. Species that had never respected humanity learned to respect Matthew Cole, and through him, they learned to respect his people. His final speech to the Concord was broadcast across every world in the galaxy. "We never wanted to be feared," he said. His voice was weaker now, aged by time, but it still carried the weight of absolute conviction. "We wanted to be partners. We wanted to build something beautiful together. All of us, every species in this vast universe. But you would not let us." He looked out at the assembly, the delegates, who now listened to human words with careful attention. "You saw our kindness as weakness. You saw our patience as submission. You pushed and pushed until we had no choice but to push back. And when we did, you discovered something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Kindness is not weakness. Patience is not submission. The species that chooses peace is not choosing it because they cannot fight. They are choosing it because they understand the cost of war, and they hope to spare everyone from paying that cost." He paused, gathering his strength for the final words. "Remember this, all of you. We could have destroyed the Vectari completely. We could have burned their worlds and scattered their people across the galaxy as refugees. We had the power. But we chose restraint. We chose to wound instead of kill, to frighten instead of annihilate. That is who we are. That is who we have always been. We are humanity. We are not monsters." His eyes swept across the assembly one last time, but we are not victims either. Never again. Matthew died 3 months later, peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was attended by representatives from over 200 species, many of whom had never sent delegations to a human ceremony before. They came to pay respect to a species they had once dismissed as irrelevant. They came because they had learned painfully and thoroughly that underestimating humanity was a mistake no one could afford to make. On Earth, in schools and homes across the planet, children learned the story. They learned about the Galactic Concord and humanity's 2 centuries of patience. They learned about Harvest 3 and the 12 million people who died there. They learned about the breaking point and the Battle of Vector Prime, and the new order that had emerged from the ashes of the old, and they learned the most. Important lesson of all, humanity had always believed in peace. They had always hoped for friendship and cooperation in a galaxy where different species could live together without fear. That hope had not died at Vector Prime. If anything, it had grown stronger, because now it was backed by the power to make it real. Across 1,000 worlds, species who had once mocked humanity now told their own children different stories. Stories about the young species who had smiled through every insult, the species who had bent but never broken, the species who had absorbed attack after attack year after year, century after century, always believing that things would get better, until one day they stopped believing, until one day they finally broke, and in breaking, showed the galaxy what strength really meant. The story ended the same way every time. No matter who was telling it or what language they spoke, no species will forget. No species can afford to forget. The humans are watching, and they remember everything.